7, 6, 11, 5, 9 and 20 miles a day.
28 Years Later is the third movie in the series and a highly anticipated follow-up to 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later. Much like the first movie, this was also directed by Danny Boyle as well as written by Alex Garland. And in this one, as the title suggests, this takes place 28 years after the rage virus had initially spread in the UK and had completely decimated the entire country. And over here, we follow a community that's living on an island that's isolated from everything when it comes to the infected or any other potential threats. However, at one point of time, a group of people from that particular community do head out on a scouting mission, and they encounter some things and make some discoveries and, realize what else is out there, and they get into some trouble and they have to figure out how to deal with it. That is the spoiler-free version of the plot synopsis. I'm not trying to go too much into detail of what happens in 28 Years Later because I don't think the marketing goes into much of that either. At least not from what I've seen. All I really saw was the first trailer, which was set to Taylor Holmes' reciting of the Boots poem by Rudyard Kipling. It was a very haunting, eerie trailer, and immediately I was very sold on what 28 Years Later was trying to do. And I'm actually a fan of these movies. I think 28 Days Later is one of the best horror movies of the 21st century. I think it's magnificently made, and as far as the zombie horror movie genre goes, it is one of the best. And I thought 28 Weeks Later was also not too bad. I actually thought it was a pretty fun watch. Not as good as 28 Days Later. I don't think it's as emotionally complex or as, characteristically, there's not a lot with some of them, the supporting characters or even the main characters. But there was a lot with the action sequences and some aspects which was dealing with the, socio-political aspects, which I thought were really interesting. 28 Years Later very much harkens back, however, to what was in 28 Days Later, which is, yes, you have a lot of the zombie spectacle that you're hoping to see when it comes to what, the action can achieve. But at the same time, it's also a very somber and emotionally impactful look at just humanity and the effect that all of this has had on people, which is something that I thought the first movie did an excellent job with. And once again, with Alex Garland at the helm, there is a very poignant story over here which is told with the characters who we're following. We're essentially following four characters played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, Jodie Comer, Alfie Williams, and Ralph Fiennes. I think all four of them are extraordinary in this movie. But I want to give a special shout to Alfie Williams. I believe this is his first ever major movie. What a kid, man. This is an incredible performance from him. And he has a lot of things to do in this movie. There are a lot of moments which are basically just being carried on his shoulders. And those moments, I think he does an exceptional job. And there is so much to this character that I think they're going to explore more, which I'm looking forward to seeing. Which is not really a spoiler because, as I'm sure you might know, they are making 2 more after this, which is going to continue the story. There is, in fact, one coming 6 months from now, which is called The Bone Temple, directed by Nia DaCosta. And I'm very excited to see that immediately. Getting ahead of myself here based on what I thought of this movie, which I think, again, it does a stellar job of just making those moments where the characters really are in grave situations or are just trying to make the best sense of a world, which is just continuing to fall apart around them. And it's all wonderfully directed by Danny Boyle. I think he does an exceptional job over here. And when it comes to the digital photography that is used over here, in this case being shot entirely on iPhones, it is incredible, some of the photography that comes through. And there are sequences over here which are very visually strange and unique, but they very much tap into Danny Boyle's sensibilities as a director. So if you've ever seen him do anything before and you're like, I feel like that's one of his signature flourishes that he does every now and then, those shots are very much present in 28 Years Later. And there's some really great use of the iPhone tech and just some of the setups that they used for cameras in some of those moments, like, when it comes to getting some really interesting angles on things, and it leads to like a very visually unique movie. Some shot choices are going to be questioned probably by some people, because there are some things that they do when it comes to like what you can see and the use of colors even at times, and there are some plays when there are in terms of the dream sequences, which is something that they show you a bit of in 28 Days Later, like how some of that looks like. And I thought they did some really, really cool stuff over there too. Their score also in this is fantastic. Young Fathers did the score for this, not John Murphy. Although you can hear John Murphy's themes in here every now and then. But the score is fantastic. Some really booming stuff in here. And I saw this in a very good sounding theater. Some moments where it really, really shook the entire place up. But like I said, this is a movie that very heavily focuses again on the emotional aspects of it. And I was surprised at how moved I was by some of that. There's a few dynamics over here between Alfie Williams and Aaron Taylor Johnson and Jodie Comer. And there's a couple of moments in each of those where they all really get a chance to shine. And there are moments which genuinely had me, sort of, it did sweep me away a little bit. Some of those moments definitely worked. I also really like what they do with some of the new zombie classifications over here. Like, there's some really big guys in this, like, called alphas, and these are very menacing types of zombies. Like, they do some really cool things over here with them. There's also some really interesting ideas that they go into when it comes to the world and everything that seems to be going on, and what else could be looked into in a later installment. I will say though that there are times where it feels like it does have a little bit more going on than I think it resolves at this point of time, and so there are some things that can feel like very like they're dangling plot threads, and there are some things that just haven't been explained as much. Now granted, that is part of the bigger structure when it comes to what else is going to be explored in the later chapters of the story, but I feel like that might be frustrating for some, because again, you're just sort of moving through a lot of things, and sometimes you don't learn a lot. Sometimes there are characters who you're introduced to who you don't get to spend a lot of time with yet, but you probably will at some other time. So maybe that'll happen. If that doesn't happen, that'll be a shame. But it does seem like there is a very interesting plan in the works over here. So I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out in the later two movies, especially when it comes to, what other characters might potentially show up, or how you might develop some of the characters who we've been introduced over here. Like Ralph Fiennes' character. There is some fascinating stuff that you learn about him in this movie, and I think there is so much more that they want to go into for the next one, and I'm so excited to see what that is going to be like and what else you're going to learn about him in the process. And so overall, I think what you get with 28 Years Later is a pretty damn good movie. I would say it's pretty great, in fact. It might not work for everybody, especially because, like I said, some of the marketing, you might see it and you might think it's a little more action-packed and, scary. It is scary, and there are moments of action in it, but this was always first and foremost about the humanity of things and what something like this does to people, and the effect that it has, and the long-term changes that it can make, it can have. And I think in those respects, once again, we get a really great movie over here. And there definitely will be more action. I have no doubt about it. There are, like I said, there are so many new infected classifications over here. There's no doubt in my mind that there's going to be more sequences with those. But at the same time, I think over here, for what this movie is trying to do as setting up what else is to come, but also as a as an evolution of everything that we've seen so far, and a very interesting look into what more can happen with the Rage virus, I think it's a pretty good movie. I think it's a really solid success. And I'm gonna give 28 Years Later a 9 out of 10. So yeah, as you can see, this video is shot in that very, specific ratio. I've tried to put it like that. Let me know if it works. It's just this very fun experiment that I wanted to try. But guys, thank you very much as always for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.